She said, don't call me no more.
Country music has always been about pain turned into poetry, about lives lived hard and songs that carry the weight of every scar. But behind some of the greatest voices this genre ever produced were battles far worse than any heartbreak song could capture. These are 20 country legends who faced diseases that ravaged their bodies, stole their voices, and in the end, took them from us completely. Some fought for years, others went without warning. All of them deserved more time. Number 20, Webb Pierce. His voice was one of the most distinctive in all of Nashville, nasal, piercing, and impossible to ignore. In the 1950s, Webb Pierce was the biggest name in country music, full stop. Songs like There Stands the Glass and slowly dominated the charts for years. He wasn't just popular, he was country music's first true superstar, a man who drove a silver dollar-covered car and lived like royalty on Music Row. But by the late 1980s, Pierce had faded from the spotlight, pushed aside by newer sounds and changing tastes. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything: pancreatic cancer. One of the most aggressive, most unforgiving diseases a human body can face. It moves fast and leaves almost no room to fight back. Pierce passed away on February 24, 1991, at the age of 69. The illness had moved through him with brutal efficiency. There was little time to prepare, and even less to say goodbye properly. For a man who once outsold every artist in country music, his final years were quiet and painful in ways the public never fully saw. What remained was the music, raw, proud, and built to last long after the man behind it was gone.
No matter what I do.
Number 19, Roy Acuff.
Ocean to the wide Pacific shore.
They called him the king of country music long before anyone else had the nerve to claim the title. Roy Acuff joined the Grand Ole Opry in 1938 and never really left. His Wabash Cannonball became one of the most recognizable songs in American history, a track that still echoes through the wooden floors of the Ryman Auditorium like a ghost that refuses to go quietly. Acuff spent his final years dealing with congestive heart failure, a condition that slowly weakens the heart's ability to pump blood effectively. The body compensates for a while, masking the damage, but over time the burden becomes too great. He had a major cardiac event in 1991 and spent considerable time in and out of the hospital after that. Despite his age and his declining health, he kept showing up to the Opry. He kept waving to the crowd from the wings when he could no longer take center stage. The Opry was his home. He wasn't about to leave it. Roy Acuff passed away on November 23, 1992 at the age of 89. His heart had simply given out, but the career it powered lasted more than 5 decades, and the standard he set for what a country performer could be has never been fully matched.
He came down from Birmingham one cold December day.
Number 18, Faron Young.
What things go for you today?
They called him the hillbilly heartthrob and the young sheriff. And in the 1950s and early 1960s, both nicknames fit perfectly. Faron Young was handsome, brash, and vocally gifted in a way that made everything look effortless. He had a swagger that country music hadn't quite seen before, and a voice that could cut clean through a crowded honky-tonk without ever losing its warmth. Hello, Walls. It's 4 in the morning. Live fast, love hard, die young. That last title carried a prophecy he probably didn't intend when he recorded it. Young had been a major star through multiple decades, one of the few artists from the 1950s country scene who managed to stay relevant well into the 1970s. But the later years were unkind. His commercial standing faded, personal demons deepened, and the depression that had been circling him for years moved closer and closer to the center of his life. In his final years, Faron Young was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The disease progressed, and combined with the weight of severe depression that had never been properly treated, it pushed him toward a darkness he couldn't find his way back out of. On December 10, 1996, Faron Young died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 64 years old. The cancer had been advancing. The depression had taken complete hold. The man who had once recorded Live Fast, Love Hard, Die Young had simply run out of road. Country music remembered the swagger. It took longer to reckon with the pain underneath it.
Another lonely night with me.
Number 17, Slim Whitman.
I'm always dreaming.
His falsetto could shatter glass and stop time in the same breath. Slim Whitman had one of the most unusual voices ever to come out of country music. High, pure, and almost operatic in its range, it made songs like Rosemary and Indian Love Call sound like they were being sung from somewhere just beyond the human world. He was enormous in the UK, outselling Elvis there at the height of the rock and roll era. And while American radio sometimes kept him at arm's length, his fan base across the Atlantic remained fiercely devoted for decades. Whitman spent his final years dealing with heart disease, a condition that had been building quietly for some time. The heart that powered all those breathtaking high notes had been working harder than it should have for longer than anyone knew. He passed away on June 19, 2013, at the age of 90. His death came from heart failure, and while he had lived a long and full life, the end still felt sudden to the fans who had been listening to that voice since the 1950s. Slim Whitman never chased the mainstream. He simply sang his way, and the world came to him on his own terms. Number 16, Don Williams. There was no one in country music who sounded quite as settled as Don Williams. His voice was low, unhurried, and warm in a way that made every song feel like a Sunday afternoon. Tulsa Time, I Believe in You, Good Old Boys Like Me. Each one delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that never needed to shout. They called him the Gentle Giant, and the name fit perfectly. Tall, bearded, soft-spoken, and utterly without pretense. But in his later years, Williams battled emphysema and COPD, diseases that erode the lungs slowly and with relentless patience. For a man whose voice was his entire instrument, the progression of these conditions was especially cruel. Breathing that once came effortlessly became a conscious effort. The voice that had reassured millions began to carry a new kind of weight. He retired from touring in 2016, citing health reasons. The lungs that had served him so well for so long simply couldn't handle the demands of the road anymore. Don Williams passed away on September 8, 2017, at the age of 78. The music world grew noticeably quieter that day. That voice, that warmth, that impossible stillness, gone. Number 15, Mel Tillis.
I call collect on the phone. You say
He turned a stutter into a punchline and then into a superpower. Mel Tillis could barely get a sentence out without stumbling over the words. But the moment he opened his mouth to sing, every syllable came out clean and true. He made the whole thing funny and then turned around and broke your heart with it. Tillis was a Grammy winner, a Country Music Hall of Fame inductee, and one of Nashville's most prolific songwriters. He wrote Detroit City and Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town, songs that became classics for other artists before he had his own run of hits. In his final years, he suffered from respiratory failure and the complications that came with it. His body had been battling cumulative damage for years, the kind that builds slowly and then arrives all at once. He passed away on November 19, 2017, at the age of 85 from respiratory failure and organ failure following surgery. The end came in a Gainesville, Florida hospital, far from the stage where he had spent the best years of his life. Mel Tillis made people laugh. He made people cry. He did both at the same time, and he made it look completely effortless.
you're just a Coca-Cola.
Number 14, Charlie Rich.
It makes me bright. Lord, don't she make
If you want to understand why some artists never quite get the recognition they deserve, look at Charlie Rich. The man could do everything. He could play barrelhouse piano, sing country ballads, slip into smooth pop crossover territory, and then turn around and cut a blues track that sounded like it came from the Delta itself. The Most Beautiful Girl put him on top of the world in 1973. Behind Closed Doors gave him his defining moment. But Rich never seemed comfortable with the spotlight, and country music never quite knew what to do with him. On July 25, 1995, Charlie Rich died in his sleep from a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that had traveled to the lungs and blocked circulation without warning. He was 62 years old. There were no prolonged goodbyes, no final farewell tour. The clock simply stopped. Pulmonary embolism doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly and without negotiation. For a man who had been wrestling with his place in the music world for years, the end came before any of those questions were answered. Charlie Rich deserved more time to record, more time to be fully understood, and more time to sit down at a piano and play whatever he felt like playing.
we get behind closed doors?
Number 13, Lefty Frizzell.
If you got the money, honey, I've got.
Before Merle Haggard, before Willie Nelson, Before virtually every laid-back, drawling country vocalist you have ever admired, there was Lefty Frizzell. The way he stretched a syllable, the way he let a word spill across 3 notes when one would have done, that was his invention. And every singer who came after him borrowed from it, whether they admitted it or not. In 1950 and 1951, Frizzell did something that has never been repeated in country music history. He held 4 spots simultaneously in the Billboard Country Top 10. 4 songs at the same time. That wasn't a career highlight, that was just his first year. But the drinking that shadowed his genius never let go. By the early 1970s, the years of hard living had taken a quiet and devastating toll on a body that wasn't even 50 years old yet. On July 19, 1975, Lefty Frizzell suffered a massive stroke at his home in Nashville. He was 47 years old. The brain bleed was catastrophic and irreversible. He never regained consciousness. One of the most naturally gifted vocalists this music has ever produced was gone before the decade was out. Merle Haggard wept openly when he heard the news. That tells you everything you need to know about what Lefty Frizzell meant to the people who understood him best.
So let's start out tonight. We'll spread joy.
Number 12, Dottie West.
I was raised on country sunshine.
She was one of the first women in country music to write her own hits, to produce her own sessions, and to build her own image on her own terms. In a Nashville that had very specific ideas about what a female country singer was supposed to be, Dottie West did things differently and paid for it and thrived because of it in equal measure. Here Comes My Baby, Country Sunshine. Her duets with Kenny Rogers in the late 1970s brought her to the biggest audience of her career. 2 voices that fit together so naturally it seemed impossible they hadn't always been singing side by side. But West's final years were financially ruined, and the stress of bankruptcy and loss had ground her down in ways that weren't always visible from the outside. Then came the accident. On August 30th, 1991, West was rushing to make a Grand Ole Opry performance when the car she was riding in crashed near the Opryland complex. The internal injuries she sustained were catastrophic. Her liver and other organs had been severely damaged. Emergency surgery followed, and then more surgery, her body fighting to hold itself together after the trauma of the crash. Dottie West passed away on September 4th, 1991, 5 days after the accident, at the age of 58. The organ failure that resulted from her injuries proved impossible to overcome. She had been on her way to the Opry when it happened. Still working, still showing up, right until the very end.
I was raised on country sunshine.
Number 11, Keith Whitley.
Saying a word, you can lie.
Here is where this list gets hardest to talk about, because Keith Whitley wasn't taken by cancer or a blood clot or a failing organ. He was taken by addiction. And addiction is a disease as real and as merciless as any other on this list, even if country radio in 1989 didn't quite know how to say that out loud. Whitley had one of the purest, most emotionally direct voices in traditional country music. Don't close your eyes when you say nothing at all. I'm no stranger to the rain. Each one delivered with a rawness that sounded lived in because it was. He had been battling alcoholism for years, quietly and painfully, while simultaneously recording the best work of his career. The 2 things existed side by side in a way that made no sense and complete sense at the same time. On May 9th, 1989, Keith Whitley was found dead in his home in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. He was 33 years old. The cause was acute alcohol poisoning, a blood alcohol level so catastrophically high that his body simply could not survive it. He left behind a wife, Lori Morgan, 2 children, and a body of work that country music spent the next 30 years trying to catch up to. The voice is still there on the recordings. Perfect, honest, and heartbreaking in ways that hit differently now that you know what was happening just behind it.
As you catch me if ever I fall.
Number 10, Ray Price.
I know it's over.
They called him the Cherokee Cowboy, and for a time in the 1950s and early 1960s, he was the most important voice in traditional country music. His shuffle beat, borrowed and perfected into something entirely his own, influenced virtually every honky-tonk artist who came after him. Crazy Arms, City Lights, For the Good Times. Each one delivered with a baritone so controlled and so rich that it seemed impossible a human voice could sustain that kind of quality over that many decades. In 2013, Ray Price was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He had just turned 87. Pancreatic cancer is among the most difficult diagnoses in medicine, with a survival rate that leaves very little room for hope. Price responded the way he had responded to everything in his long career. He kept working. He went into the studio, He finished a final album while the disease moved through him. He passed away on December 16, 2013 at the age of 87. But the final album, Beauty Is Where You Find It, was completed and released. A last statement from a man who refused to let cancer have the final word. Ray Price earned every accolade country music ever gave him, and then he earned a few more on the way out.
Hey, your head.
Number 9. Porter Wagoner. Before Dolly Parton was Dolly Parton, she was Porter Wagoner's discovery, a young girl from East Tennessee whose voice he put in front of a national television audience week after week. Wagoner hosted one of country music's most popular syndicated television shows for over 2 decades, and his rhinestone suits and 6'4" frame made him one of the most recognizable figures the genre ever produced. But behind the sequins and the showmanship was a genuine artist. A hard country singer who dealt in stories about poverty, loneliness, and the darker corners of rural American life. A Satisfied Mind, Green, Green Grass of Home, songs that didn't flinch. In 2007, Porter Wagoner was diagnosed with lung cancer. The disease had moved into his lungs quietly, and by the time it was found, the situation was already serious. He had been a smoker for most of his adult life, a fact that was common knowledge and a reality that the cancer announcement made unavoidably concrete. He passed away on October 28, 2007 at the age of 80. He had spent his final months finishing a final album, working with a focus that cancer apparently sharpened rather than diminished. Dolly Parton held his hand at the end. His hand at the partnership that had defined both of their early careers closed the same way it had always operated, with loyalty and with music. Number 8. Roger Miller.
Trailer for sale or rent.
He was the funniest man in country music and one of its most purely gifted songwriters. Roger Miller wrote with a speed and wit that seemed almost unfair to everyone else working in Nashville at the same time. King of the Road, Dang Me, Husbands and Wives, England Swings. Songs that came from somewhere so original that no one has ever convincingly figured out how to imitate them. He won 11 Grammy Awards in 2 years. 11. In 1964 and 1965, he essentially made the Grammys his personal property and then walked away from the spotlight like it was nothing. In the late 1980s, Miller was diagnosed with throat cancer, then lung cancer. For a man whose entire identity was built on words and the way he delivered them, a disease that attacks the throat and lungs carries a particular weight. The surgeries and treatments that followed altered his voice in ways that were painful to hear if you knew what it had once been. Roger Miller passed away on October 25, 1992 at the age of 56. He was far too young. The cancer had moved through him over several years, eventually spreading beyond the point where treatment could hold it back. What he left behind in those 2 years alone, those 2 impossible Grammy years, would have been enough for 10 careers. He left behind much more than that.
Third boxcar, midnight train.
Number 7. Glen Campbell.
Same old song, I know every crack.
Few stories in this entire list are as heartbreaking as this one. Because Glen Campbell's disease didn't take his life quickly, it took it slowly, piece by piece, memory by memory. Campbell was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2011, and rather than disappear quietly, he made the choice to go public with the diagnosis, and then go on tour one final time. The goodbye tour lasted 2 years. 2 years of watching a man perform as the disease actively dismantled his ability to remember where he was, who he was, and what song came next. The miracle was that even as his memory dissolved, his fingers still found the guitar. The music lived somewhere deeper than the disease could reach, at least for a while. His Ghost on the Canvas album, recorded during the early stages of the diagnosis, is one of the most quietly devastating pieces of music country has ever produced. Rhinestone Cowboy, Wichita Lineman, Southern Nights, Galveston. A catalog so rich and so varied that it defied easy categorization. Campbell was never just country. He was something bigger than any one genre could contain.
Washed away like the snow and the...
He passed away on August 8, 2017 at the age of 81 after spending his final years in a memory care facility. His wife Kim stayed with him through every stage. The documentary I'll Be Me filmed during the farewell tour, is required viewing for anyone who wants to understand what Alzheimer's actually does to a human being in real time. Glen Campbell deserved a different ending. All of them do. Number 6, Tammy Wynette.
The words we don't want.
She sang Stand By Your Man and became a symbol whether she wanted to or not. Tammy Wynette spent most of her career being reduced to that one song, that one sentiment, while the full complexity of what she was as an artist and as a woman went largely unexamined by the mainstream. The truth was far more interesting and far more painful. Wynette battled health problems for most of her adult life. Bile duct disease led to dozens of surgeries over the years, a grinding procession of hospitals and recovery rooms, and setbacks that would have finished a lesser person. She performed through it. She recorded through it. She refused to let the body's failures stop the work. On April 6, 1998, Tammy Wynette was found dead in her Nashville home at the age of 55. The cause was a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in the lung, the same silent assassin that had taken Charlie Rich 3 years earlier. Given her long history of surgeries and the blood clot risks that accompany prolonged medical treatment, it was a connection that made tragic sense in retrospect. Her voice on recordings like DIVORCE and Till I Can Make It on My Own tells you everything she never quite got to say about what her life actually cost her. Listen close enough and you can hear it.
But the words we're hiding.
Number 5, Conway Twitty. The name was borrowed from 2 towns on a road map, and it became one of the most recognizable brands in country music history. Conway Twitty had started as a rock and roller, came close to the Elvis lane in the late 1950s, and then pivoted into country with such completeness that a generation of younger fans never knew he had been anything else. 40 #1 hits, more than any other artist in country music chart history at his peak. Hello, Darlin', Tight-Fittin' Jeans, You've Never Been This Far Before. A string of chart toppers that defined the mainstream country sound for nearly 2 decades. On June 5, 1993, Twitty collapsed following a performance in Branson, Missouri. He was rushed to a hospital in Springfield. The cause was an abdominal aortic aneurysm, a rupture in the main blood vessel running through the body's core. It is one of the most catastrophic medical emergencies a person can experience. Survival depends entirely on how quickly surgical intervention occurs. For Conway Twitty, it was not quick enough. He passed away on June 5, 1993, at the age of 59. The end came without a long illness, without a prolonged goodbye. He was on stage one night and gone the next morning. 59 years old. 40 #1s. The math has never added up to anything close to fair. Number 4, Merle Haggard.
Was a lonesome whistle blowing and a young's dream.
He was country music's conscience. If you want to understand what the genre could be at its most honest, at its most clear-eyed about poverty and prison and the cost of living a hard life, you Merle Haggard, and you work backward from there. Mama Tried, Okie from Muskogee, The Fugitive, Working Man Blues, If We Make It Through December. A catalog that stretched across every corner of American working class experience with a specificity and an honesty that no one else in country music has ever fully matched. Haggard had been battling lung cancer and pneumonia for some time before his final weeks, a combination that put an enormous burden on a respiratory system that had already absorbed decades of hard living. He had beaten cancer once before and seemed to believe, perhaps rightly, that he could beat it again. On April 6, 2016, Merle Haggard passed away from double pneumonia. He was 79 years old. The date was his birthday. If there is a more Merle Haggard way to exit this world, it is difficult to imagine what it would be. He had been recording right up until the end. There were unfinished tracks left in the studio when he died, because Merle Haggard didn't stop until he physically could not continue. That was who he was. The music didn't stop until the man did.
From your family making mine.
Number 3, George Jones.
He said, I'll love you till...
Nobody alive or dead has ever sung a country song the way George Jones sang a country song. That is not hyperbole. It is the considered opinion of virtually every musician, producer, and critic who ever spent serious time with the genre. Jones had a voice that could turn a simple phrase into a complete emotional landscape, that could break a lyric open and find something inside it that the writer hadn't even known was there. He stopped loving her. Today is routinely called the greatest country song ever recorded. Listen to what he does with the final verse, and you will understand why that conversation stops there. Jones had battled alcoholism for decades, a fact so widely known it had become part of his mythology. The tractor he rode to the liquor store when Tammy took the car keys. The shows he didn't make. The years of damage that accumulated quietly alongside the genius.
Every single high and low.
In his final years, Jones dealt with hypertensive respiratory failure, his body struggling under the long-term effects of decades of hard living, infections, and the grinding wear of a system pushed far beyond its limits for far too long. He was hospitalized with a chest infection in early 2013, and the respiratory complications that followed proved too much to overcome. George Jones passed away on April 26, 2013 at the age of 81. The cause was hypoxic respiratory failure. The greatest country singer who ever lived took his last breath in a Nashville hospital, and the silence he left behind has never quite been filled. Number 2, Waylon Jennings.
A long time forgotten.
He should have been on the plane. On February 3, 1959, Waylon Jennings gave up his seat on a chartered flight that also carried Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. The plane went down in an Iowa cornfield, and all three died. Jennings carried the survivor's guilt of that night for the rest of his life. He used it as fuel, outlaw country. The movement that pushed back against Nashville's polished machinery in the 1970s started largely because of Waylon Jennings' refusal to do what he was told. Are you sure? Hank done it this way. Mamas don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Good-hearted woman. Luckenbach, Texas. A run of records that sounded like freedom put on vinyl.
She's a good-hearted woman.
Jennings had struggled with drug addiction for years, a cocaine dependency that had been both part of his outlaw image and a genuine disease eating through his health. He got clean in the late 1980s, but the damage had been accumulating silently the whole time. In 2001, he had his right foot amputated due to diabetes-related complications, a direct consequence of the cardiovascular damage that years of hard living had done to his body. The diabetes that had been building in his system took on a more aggressive character as his overall health declined. Waylon Jennings passed away on February 13, 2002, at the age of 64, from diabetic complications. The man who had cheated death in an Iowa field in 1959 lost the longer fight 43 years later. He was always too big for whatever room he was in. The world felt the loss of his size the moment he left it. Number 1. Hank Williams. There was no one before him. There has been no one since him. When you trace the line of every artist on this list, when you trace the line of country music itself, every single thread runs back to Hank Williams. The voice, the darkness, the simplicity that was somehow never actually simple at all. I'm so lonesome I could cry. Your cheatin' heart, cold, cold heart. Hey, good looking. Lost Highway. Songs that didn't sound like they were written. They sounded like they had always existed, like Williams had simply gone looking for them and found them where they had been waiting. He was 29 years old when he died. Williams had been born with spina bifida occulta, a spinal condition that caused chronic back pain throughout his entire life and contributed to his dependence on alcohol and morphine to manage it. The disease that shadowed him from birth shaped everything that came after. The pain that runs through the music was not invented for the sake of the song, it was real. It was physical. It had been there since childhood. He also suffered from acne inversa, a painful chronic skin condition, and the combination of chronic pain, alcohol dependency, and the relentless self-medication that came with both of them wore his body down at a pace that seemed impossible for a man his age. On January 1st, 1953, Waylon Jennings' future driver found Hank Williams dead in the back seat of a Cadillac somewhere between Knoxville and Canton, Ohio. Heart failure, officially. The cumulative failure of a body destroyed by years of pain and the substances he used to manage it, more precisely. He had recorded enough music in his short career to define a genre and influence every artist who came after him across country, rock and roll, folk, and everything in between. 29 years old, a handful of recording sessions, a body of work that the rest of the 20th century spent trying to live up to. Hank Williams was country music's first real tragedy. He was also its first real miracle. and nothing that came before or after him has ever quite made sense of that contradiction.
You think maybe we could find us?
That's 20 country legends who left us far too soon, taken by diseases that don't care how many number ones you had or how many hearts you moved. If this list brought back any memories, if any of these stories hit closer than expected, share them in the comments. And if you want to keep going, check out our next video covering 10 country albums that changed everything. More legends, more music, and more stories that deserve to be told.